Fox News alert millions of American families.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm George Thomas. We begin with the latest.
Here at St. John's Basketball March.
There are certainly a lot of efforts here at the LAPD.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm George Thomas. We begin with the latest in the coronavirus pandemic. Number of cases here in the U.S.
All right, and we're live for the first time ever, actually a little bit early. It's surprising, usually always showing up late. So I'm really excited about my guest tonight, the host of the Naturalist Capitalist Podcast. Hide your wives, hide your girlfriends, Reed Coverdale. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Not too bad, just hanging in there, trying to get through everything that seems to be going on in the world and trying to push it out and still focus on family and friends.
Yeah, well, that's all you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's nuts out there. So the reason the reason I chose this date was today was the last day that CNN had their contract for airport streaming. Anyone who doesn't know, CNN would get contracts with airports all over the United States and the world, and they would purchase the TVs. They'd pay a portion of the bills just so they could stream their channel in all the airports. So anytime you ever traveled through air, that's exactly why CNN was on every television. They were paying to inflate their numbers, basically. And now that's all over. So score one.
So who's replacing them?
That I actually have no idea. Because it was left up to whatever individual airport. So I assume it's going to be probably a mixture. Honestly, if I ran an airport, I probably wouldn't choose news, especially with how divisive everything is. It just, doesn't seem like a good idea, but...
Yeah, just play Back to the Future or something. It'd be better.
Yeah, exactly. Something people actually want to watch while they're sitting there on a layover. Kind of makes sense. So I did get together this little highlight reel of all the glorious things CNN have done just recently. Let's pull this up.
I can't hear it, and I don't know if you can.
Can't you?
Nope.
All right. Well, we'll try that in just a minute. So one thing I want to talk about is the impact that propaganda has on people themselves, society as a whole. I think we see a lot of that coming out right now in between COVID, everything going on in Ukraine. So how do you personally see through all of the bullshit?
I mean, you kind of have to learn whom you can trust, who has a good track record of being correct. So I look for that. And, I think people like Ron Paul or Dennis Kucinich, Rand Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, to a lesser extent, like Matt Gaetz or people like that, or sometimes sort of good on some of this stuff. So you kind of figure out who tends to be correct in the long run. And then those are kind of your primary sources you go to for news. And then you have to still have a little bit of a bullshit detector and just try to figure out what's true on your own. I think the trap you could fall into is becoming a contrarian. Like if you just hear something and you automatically just go with the opposite. I think that's how you end up with Alex Jones and like the 9/11 kook movement, stuff like that. Like there's the truth is usually a little bit complicated and a little bit somewhere in the middle, I guess. So I mean, but whenever they're trying to get you into a war, pretty much every time it's always been a lie. Or every time actually, it's always been based on lies. So you can pretty much always guarantee they're lying when they're trying to start a war. And then with other stuff like COVID, that's where the contrarianism gets really dangerous, because then you have people just denying that COVID even exists, or just kind of going nuts saying ridiculous stuff that's just as dumb as what the media is saying. So with that type of thing, it's kind of important to try to actually look at the facts. And I found with COVID, the government wasn't actually lying that much. It was mostly the media. Like if you went on the CDC website and you read the statistics off their page, you'd come away saying like, holy shit, I got like nothing to worry about. I mean, they would say like, you should get vaccinated, you should do this, you should do this. But if you look at the raw numbers that they were reporting through the CDC, you'd be like, what's the big fucking deal? I don't really get what we're all so scared about. But the media would just tell blatant lies, or at best like half truths or out of context truths. They wouldn't tell the whole truth. They just they'd tell part of it to make it sound a certain way or whatever. And you just have to you kind of have to have a little bit of common sense and just learn from what's going on and look around and just know who you can trust from the past, and just try to figure it out. Like I don't know 100% that I've been right about everything I think I've been right about, but it seems to be more consistent than what everybody else seems to be going with. So I don't know. I'm just doing my best. I think everyone's just got to try. So
yeah. So what was the first like aha moment you had, like when you were first coming to realize so much of this was bullshit? Just in your life.
Probably. Well, I it's weird because I started rethinking certain ideas I had in like 2014, like 7 years ago, but I didn't really like have an aha moment, like wow, they suck and they're lying about everything. I didn't have that moment probably until 2018 when Trump met with Kim Jong-un, because I'd say till that point I was probably still what most people call blue-pilled, just kind of, yeah, they're wrong about stuff, and yeah, they make a lot of mistakes, but I wasn't fully on board with the, they're evil and they're doing this intentionally. But I remember Trump was making it sound like we were headed for nuclear war with North Korea, and he was like saying we'll rain down hell and fire upon them if they do anything out of line or whatever. And I was like, oh God, here we go. And then 2 weeks later, he's meeting with Kim in Korea and they're trying to establish some sort of peace deal. And I was like, holy shit, this is great. Like, this is exactly what we'd want to happen, right? But then the response from the media was Trump is a traitor, Trump is a dictator lover, Trump is, the worst thing on planet Earth. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is literally the best case scenario. Like a week ago, I don't know if you remember that that false alarm in Hawaii when they thought missile was incoming. Like things were kind of tense. So after that, I started realizing like, wow, okay, there's like intentional propaganda going on here. It's not just that they're wrong about this stuff. Like, they are intentionally selling us a false narrative. And then working on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign in 2020, man, like there was no doubt after that there was a concerted effort to destroy people who oppose, especially the foreign policy establishment. Like, if you do not think Russia is the most evil dictatorship in the world, or that Assad or like any of these secular dictators that the United States empire doesn't like, that they're not like worse than Hitler, then you're a traitor. And it's
un-American.
Yeah. So it probably started with that. I mean, because I was more like a Justin Amash type libertarian before that, like very reformist, and also more just like, oh, people are just misled and they don't know the right way to do this, and the people in charge just aren't very smart. But I've leaned a lot more. I still think that some of that's true. Like, sometimes it is people just being inept and stupid, but there are a lot of people who are evil, and there is a very large propaganda campaign that is run to administer a certain narrative and destroy people who deviate from it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't really have an aha moment either. It wasn't like a light switch or anything. It definitely slowly built. My first exposure though was G. Edward Griffin and him talking about the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I realized that is just complete made up, like monopoly money is now worth more than the US dollar, the Fed notes, which is insane to me. But once I realized that was all planned, it really kind of sent me down a rabbit hole of like, okay, well, exactly how far can this go? Of course, that can be dangerous as well, and I implore anyone to not go too far. Then you end up with like David Icke or Jack Casey, who thinks the Earth is flat.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, the structure of the Fed and how everything was pretty much rigged against us was really what sent me over the edge. I was just like, oh, okay, so then no matter what, like they're forcing us to pay taxes even though they can just print more. So what is this exactly? And that's really what sent me down at least the libertarian path. I just find it interesting, and nowadays personally I always just wait. When something happens, I always just wait, and just before I even form an opinion at this point. Seems like about the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, there's lies coming from all sides about everything, so yeah, it's always smart to wait. You never know who's telling the truth, or I mean, you can always guess who's lying. It's hard to know who's telling the truth,
Well, and especially right now with Ukraine and Russia. I mean, and that came on so quickly too, just like almost overnight. But everybody's getting censored. Everyone's like screaming at each other, waving the Ukrainian flag. I mean, I've seen some pro-Russia people, few, because they tend to get yelled at quite a bit, stuff thrown at them, windows broken, that sort of thing. It just kind of seems like both sides are shitty. It seems like, I mean, especially with the revelation of Hunter Biden's laptop recently, kind of showing that Hunter Biden and the Biden family in general had been kind of entrenched in some of the illegal activities over there with the energy companies. God knows what's going on with the biolabs. Like there's just there's so much, and honestly, that's kind of why I've stayed out of that, and just I think both sides suck.
Yeah, the biolabs is new, but I've known about the laptop stuff for a while just because of Ryan Dawson. I mean, he did a
Me
whole
too.
did a whole documentary on it in, I think, 2019 or something. So
Yeah.
it's funny seeing like everybody suddenly become aware of stuff that it's like, oh yeah, I've known that for a while.
Yeah, right.
But
Well, it was kind of funny with the laptop. Well, and there was a video of Joe Biden basically claiming or laughing with his elitist buddies about the quid pro quo that
right.
he had performed while he was vice president. And it was just floating around out there, and just nobody touched it. And it was just really interesting. Um, I would definitely like to point out Ryan Dawson's website, ancreport.com. Make sure and go check it out. It's really awesome. The documentary, Corn Pop's Revenge, absolutely mind blowing. I'll throw that down in the episode description.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just crazy. Even Trump called Biden out during the election, and everyone, oh, anti-Trump, and I'm not pro-Trump, but it's interesting. Things just blowing up now.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at Trump is the same way I look at January 6th. It's just like, so much potential and you got nothing out of it, sort of, like
Yeah.
the average reaction to Trump you see is just like, oh my God, he was so terrible and he was such a dictator and such a racist, homophobic, whatever. And it's like, wow, that's not my opinion. My opinion is he could have been, a real thorn in the side of the powers that be, and he wasn't. Like he would talk a big talk occasionally, but 9.5 times out of 10, he would just do whatever they wanted him to do. So
yeah,
it bugs me that I see people like wanting him to come back, because he's talking big again because he's not president. And as soon as he becomes president, why do you think he's going to be any different than he was before?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, people want him back, but it's like, man, he was not your friend when he was in there, So
No, not really. And I mean, what really pissed me off about the Trump presidency was that I found myself defending him more often than not, just for the sake of arguing truth. And
Right.
it really pissed me off, because I'm like, I'm not pro Trump. But if you're going to criticize the guy, at least be honest about it. And I don't know. I do enjoy the fact that I would say the enemies of liberty, human prosperity, definitely showed their true colors. Maybe not their full color, but definitely their true colors. And it definitely, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes. I kind of just wish it wasn't all the way over to the cult of personality of Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, what you're saying about defending Trump, it's true. Like, I found myself doing that too. I mean, claiming that he was a Russian sympathizer when he was arming the shit out of Ukraine the whole time, and he helped bring, I think 2 more countries came into NATO while he was president. He did like talk a little bit of smack about the funding going to NATO, but that's what he does. That's Trump. He complains about stuff and never does anything. So, what was amazing was the amount of hatred he got for how little trouble he actually caused. Like, I mean, they wanted him out of there just for, occasionally saying something, or maybe very, very occasionally doing something they didn't like. Like they want complete submission. And the unfortunate thing is, so many people took away from that, oh, that must mean Trump is really bucking the system if these guys don't like him. And it's like, no, it's worse than that. He's actually doing almost everything they want him to do. But just because he doesn't believe in it, and he occasionally will say something that he's not supposed to say, that wasn't in the notes or whatever, that's why they hate him so much, and that's why they want to get rid of him. And then on top of that, I felt like they needed to create a monster to make Biden look good, right? Like when you have Biden and Harris, the opposition just has to look absolutely despotic. So the media did everything they could in 2020 to just make Trump sound like the worst, most careless, like, asshole ever. And I think it was really just to try to save Biden's image a little bit, because it's hard to make him look good. Like if you can't make Biden look good, you just got to make Trump look bad. It's easier to make Trump look bad than it is to make Biden look good. So that was the route they went. But yeah, you're right. Like the tons of the accusations made against him were ridiculous. Like it's just like with Tulsi Gabbard, I've got criticisms of her, but they're completely different. They're the opposite of what the criticisms made of her by other people are, like that she's that she's a peacenik and is too willing to roll over for dictators or whatever. And my thing is like, actually, I think she's like a little too militaristic in some ways, so it's just funny how they spin everything. And it's almost always an inversion of the truth.
Yeah, it's I don't even know what to make of it just because I see it. So it's hard for me to understand how people could look at certain reporters or certain pieces of news and really just buy into it. Just that cognitive dissonance, even thinking about it just kind of frustrates my brain cells a little bit, and it just doesn't sit right with me. So I don't understand how somebody could honestly take those positions. My favorite one is always the person who is anti-cop but also anti-gun, saying cops need to come take the guns and they're the only ones that need to have them. It's like, okay, you can't rectify that in your own mind. I'm just talking to an irrational person at this point, and I don't think we can go anywhere productive anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem nowadays. No one arrives anywhere rationally or cares about being consistent. So political discourse is pretty much impossible because they'll just call you a racist or an anti-Semite or a Russian asset or whatever and shut the conversation down, and you can't reason. So what are you supposed to do? Like, how do you argue with someone like that? Like they bring you down to their level and then they beat you with experience, so it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. So what do you think the future of the liberty movement is, considering that that's pretty much sums up the antithetical opposition to everybody in the liberty movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that exists on the right too, not just the left. Like, the right looks a little bit better right now just because the left is so bad and they're in charge of everything. But I really don't buy this narrative that the right has learned its lesson and gotten better. Like, I think some people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are great. Like, a lot of the stuff they're saying is amazing right now. And maybe those people have learned on war. But you see like Sean Hannity, all these people who were completely pro-Trump, and apparently like being pro-Trump meant Trump changed the Republican Party to being anti-war or whatever. Like, it's just bullshit. It's not true. Like, most of them are not. Most of them will just go along with the flow, and trying to rationally argue with them about the police or about ending the wars. I mean, it's a battle. So I think there are people within the right and within the left that are reachable who will listen to logic, but there's not a lot of them. So I'm kind of black-pilled on this nationwide evangelical mission for liberty, basically. Like, I mean, I support Dave Smith and his run for 2024. I think that's a good idea, but I don't think that it's going to systemically change anything. I think it might, if it's really successful, it could wake millions of people up. But even if it's as successful or even more successful than Ron Paul's campaign, I still don't think it's going to systemically change anything. Because you look at Ron Paul's campaigns, the debt has only increased since then. The government's just gotten bigger. So it's great if we can keep waking people up, but we've got to start. We got to start having some change. You know, like we gotta see some stuff start rolling back. So I think putting all the focus on the top, on the presidency, is a mistake. Like, I don't think that that's how things are going to change. I think the whole point of running someone for president at this point is just getting the message out there and waking people up. I don't think it does anything other than that. Like, you know, Bernie Sanders was able to do that, get a huge message across by running for president.
Yeah.
Ron Paul, same thing. You know, so I think that it has value in that sense. But even if someone like Dave Smith were to become president, I think they would not be allowed to change things to the extent we'd want them to, or if they tried to anyway, that they would be removed. There would either be some scandal that was manufactured or an accident would take place, you know, and they wouldn't be president anymore. So I just don't think that that is an extremely effective way to actually change policy or, you know, affect change in government. I think the way to do that is through local action. So build up your county, build up your state, make it more impervious to outside forces. So if you can make Second Amendment sanctuary counties or states, if you can, you know, pass defend the guard legislation in your state, stuff like that. So stuff that, you know, I'm a naturalist. I believe it's like an evolutionary process. Things go from the ground up, you know, it's not like a top-down structure that you can fix. So if you can remove the support from the bottom in all these different areas, little by little, it's going to weaken the beast. So I personally, I'm moving back to New Hampshire in a couple months to take part in the Free State Project, because I'm even black-pilled to the point where it's like there aren't enough of us in most states to like create change within our states. Like, you know, we gotta, because not many people think like we do. We think rationally, and we actually look at how this all functions and try to come up with a reasonable solution. And most people just don't do that. So we've had to, you know, resort to trying to work, you know, with Democrats or Republicans, and they just don't care. So I like the idea of the Free State Project, just trying to concentrate libertarians there who already think this way. And, you know, I want New Hampshire to be like the libertarian San Francisco or the libertarian Texas. So what I mean by that is, if you're a conservative who lives in San Francisco, you're embarrassed to talk about it when you go out in public, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm from, I don't really want to talk about it. You know, you don't want to admit you're from San Francisco. And while you're there, you want to do nothing but leave. And then if you're a liberal who's from Florida right now, you feel the same way. You're just like, oh, I hate this place, and I never want to admit to anyone that I'm from here. So I want New Hampshire to become that for But for libertarians, like libertarians control the culture and control the government, and the conservatives and liberals just don't want anything to do with it. Like they'll feel pressured to leave, not through government force, but just through cultural pressure, just like you know just like California and Florida. So I don't know, that's the vision I have, and I feel like that's probably attainable within a couple decades or something. But I mean, maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I don't see a nationwide liberty movement like taking the hearts and minds of everybody and ending the wars and rolling back the state and ending the Fed. I just don't see it happening. So I think it's got to be a bottom up struggle.
I definitely agree. It's bottom up. I try not to be black pilled on the situation, and the reason why is because I try to put into perspective how long it actually took us to get to how terrible things are. Like this wasn't an overnight situation.
Right.
Of course, there were big situations that happened that really gave us a violent shove in this direction.
Mhm.
But it's going to take just as long, if not longer, to get back. And not only is that going to start local, but that's also going to start in the family structure, whatever that may be for whoever. If just raise liberty families with whoever you choose to be with. Just start promoting those ideas. And one thing I wish the Libertarian Party itself would actually focus on is youth outreach. It's pretty much by the time somebody is late 20s, maybe early 30s, they're pretty much decided upon. And not that there's not value in talking to these people or debating them, anything at this point, but get them while they're young. Obviously, the opposition to anyone who doesn't want liberty has been doing that. So why don't we? And those two things, I think, really do keep me, I would say, gray pilled, because I don't see a whole lot of movement behind these ideas, but the fact that it can still happen still gives me hope. So that's pretty much where I sit. That does. Oh, there you are.
Oh, can you still see me? All right, cool.
Yep.
I certainly agree with you on the youth aspect. Like, I mean, I kind of gave up my neoconservative background when I was about 19 or 20 years old. And that was pretty easy at that age, where my parents weren't neocons, but they were conservatives. Well, it's weird. They were like George Bush conservatives, but anti-war. So it's just like this really weird thing. They weren't libertarians. Like, they were not supportive of gay marriage. They were not for legalizing drugs. They were like traditional conservatives, but just didn't want to go bomb Iraq. So, but my dad has basically become a libertarian over the last decade, and it's been a really challenging process for him. Like, he still kind of struggles with the propaganda aspect of things. Like, I have to talk him through it, and it was way easier for me to break out of it because I was younger and it hadn't been drilled into my head as much. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just don't understand why. I mean, conservatives and liberals both do it. I should actually say Republicans and Democrats, just because conservative and liberal, though the actual meaning means something different than what they mean now. But I mean, like the big fight of what's going on with the don't groom kids or don't say gay bill, like this is like one of the biggest issues in the country right now, besides transgender kids in sports at school or just in general. And it's all focusing on the kids. I just find it interesting that we as the Liberty Movement aren't, sliding in between the legs of both of these two people fighting and be like, hey kids, have you ever heard about the free market? Like, it just seems like kind of a wise idea to use some resources for that.
What I see is life has become so easy in America because there's so much technology, and you just don't have to do as much as you used to. Everything is prepared for you. We still, at least for now, live in a consumer society, not a producing society. So people need to manufacture their own struggles, right? So that's why people do things like going backpacking or traveling, or they have hobbies, because there's just not enough struggle in real life, right? So what other people do is they'll join these outrage campaigns, about like having to do with transgender issues or gay rights or whatever it is, and they'll make it into this huge deal that it really isn't. Like, I mean, the right to self-ownership as a gay person is not a struggle in the United States, by and large. I mean, in some extreme situations, maybe it is, but by and large, not that difficult.
Yeah.
And so it was a while, like, 20 years ago for sure. And then even like 10 years ago, it was more challenging, but now it's really not. And the culture is not against gay people. It's just not true. So there needs to be an internalized struggle that you create. And then the same with the transgender movement. Like, people thought the transgender thing was kind of weird at first, but then they just got used to it. So now it's being pushed like way beyond its boundaries. Like, it's not about just if you are an adult who wants to transition now. It's about like forcing it on kids and, like teaching it to, I mean, it's just gone like way overboard, being on the swim team. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. But this is all because people need a struggle. They need a cause. So if the libertarians can step in and be like, hey kids, I know you're, arguing about transgender rights or about being allowed to pray in school or whatever your fake outrage, your feeling of oppression is. Let's tell you about the war in Yemen, or the way the Palestinians are being treated by the Israelis under our support. This is like a legit, barbaric, heinous action that our country is actually committing. So I don't know, to me, like, that's, if you have outrage fuel, if you need to burn your energy being upset about something, like, don't waste it on these stupid cultural battles. And the right does it too. Like, like, we need to bring prayer back into schools. Well, you could still pray in school. Like, you don't need, I don't know, like, it's the same crap. Like, it's, Christians are persecuted in the United States. It's like, no, gay people are not persecuted in the United States. Christians are also not persecuted in the United States. It's just ridiculous. Like, unless you're, in jail because of a victimless crime, you're not being persecuted in the United States. Like, it just doesn't happen on a wide scale, aside from, things like the war on drugs. That there's another one right there. Like, if you have outrage about innocent people being persecuted in the United States, then go after the criminal justice system. Don't worry about whatever stupid cultural thing you got. So, like, there's plenty of opportunity for libertarians to step in and say, yo, hey, if you if you really need a cause, we've got one, and we've got several venues. We've got domestic issues and, foreign issues that you can latch onto, and there's plenty of violence and hatred and evil that you can fight against and, feel validated for. So I don't know.
Well, and the culture stuff, it only concerns me because both sides on the extreme let in some really weird people that push some really nasty ideas too. So, I mean, I don't care. People can live however they want. I'll call them whatever they want. I don't really care. I'm more focused on myself and my family and friends anyways. So, but I can see the rights argument regarding predators being able to come in and fly in under that radar. And if you criticize them, then that's that. Same thing happens on the right, though, with very obviously not quite as much, but violent people who push some really anti like race stuff. I've definitely come across it throughout my years. It's uncommon, but it's not. Well, and I would say it's uncommon on both sides. However, these culture wars, when you're pushing them so hard like this, it really does open up the floodgates for a lot of these people to sneak in under the radar. And that's the only reason I usually ever pay attention to the culture war stuff, because this can go very bad very quickly. And it doesn't matter what side, honestly. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, if I were a transgender man right now, I would be so angry because, I would be being used as a political pawn, right? Like I think your average transgender person probably, first of all, doesn't want any attention drawn to it. I mean, I worked with a transgender person, and he acted like nobody in the company knew that he was transgender, where actually everybody did know, but we just never said anything to him about it because he wanted to be a man. So it was like, okay. And he had a beard and he had a deep voice and he had gone through surgeries or whatever. You wouldn't have been able to tell. And it's like, all right, whatever. I don't care. Like it's your thing. And I think most like genuinely average people who end up doing that, that's probably how they are. They probably don't want to bring attention to it. And it's probably not the most pleasant experience in the world because like this guy, he was working a tough outdoor job and he was transitioning throughout I wasn't there. He'd been working there a lot longer than I had, but when he first came, like he still looked like a woman, and he went through that transition while he was working that job with a bunch of dudes. And I mean, like opening himself up to a ton of ridicule and everything. So it's like, all right, yeah, that if there's a person who's going through something like that, they probably don't want any attention drawn to it. It's probably not something they want celebrated. They probably want to move on from the transition and just forget it ever happened and be like, okay, I'm moving on with my life and stop like obsessing over me. But that's not what's being done right now. Like it's the opposite. Like it's being obsessed over and it's being celebrated and being pushed on people. I mean, why would you? I mean, it's a deformity to, be transgender. Like, I mean, and yeah, I mean, especially if you frame it in, the kind of liberal perspective that it was, you actually are the other sex and it was a mistake or whatever. Like, why would you wish that on someone, or why would you want that for somebody? It's like celebrating. Yeah. It's like celebrating blindness or something. It's just like, what? Like, why? Like, that sucks. I feel sorry for people who are in this situation. So if I were in that situation, I'd be so mad right now because I feel like There are a lot of normal people who have gone through a sex change, and you probably wouldn't know it at all. But these fringe weirdos who are like going on swim teams and who are, third grade teachers or whatever who want to tell their class about what they've done. I mean, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, you're so fucking insane. So I don't know. Like, I think that there are a lot of normal people who are being, or who are like getting caught up in this and getting ruined by it. And that's what the goal always is with like these fringe causes. That's what they do. They completely delegitimize normal people. So it just sucks all around. And you're right. Like, a lot of these weird people are usually doing it for some strange fucking reasons. So yeah, it's just, it sucks.
Yeah, that's my biggest reason to ever pay attention to these, because I personally do believe that the fact that, I mean, our country has never not been in a war for as long as I've lived, or help funded a war, or help do nation building, gone in and assassinated a country's leader just because they wouldn't buy into the petrodollar. Like, these are major issues to me. This cultural stuff, yeah, it's interesting, but it also gets old too. So I agree that we definitely should be pushing a lot of these bigger issues. That's why I loved when Dave Smith went on Rogan and just talked about Yemen the whole time.
Yeah.
And just, it was great, honestly. So, I mean, I don't even know exactly what to do other than just keep having conversations like this, keep just pushing it out there, keep repeating what's right. And what's right is that we shouldn't be funding nations that are murdering people. We shouldn't be promoting pedophiles. We shouldn't be promoting racists. We shouldn't be promoting any of these people, because all of these things are violations of people's sovereignty. And I don't know. Honestly, I'm still just white pilled in this. I think we're picking up a lot of steam, and I see a great future for the liberty movement. Honestly, thanks to people like you and everyone else within the liberty podcast space, honestly. So
yeah, well, let's hope so. I don't know. I think the optimism that you can get out of this is that things are so stupid that people realize that they're stupid. Like, I mean, if they're just a little stupid, people don't see the stupidity sometimes, but when it's just full on blatant clown world, it's kind of hard to ignore. So some people who wouldn't have dug deep before are now forced to. So there's something to be said about that. And maybe that is actually going to be what ends up saving us, people just being pushed to the brink and realizing, wow, we need change.
She said
so
nope.
I don't know.
So the only thing that scares me about it is just the state pushing a lot of these ideas as well. That's what freaks me out. Because I think a lot of these movements would definitely either calm down and kind of just disappear, or they probably just would have fizzled out and just gone away completely. But then you have the almighty power of the media, the U.S. government, well, you can name any government, pushing these ideas as well, which really makes me wonder if all of these things are not just a marketing campaign, kind of like Edward Bernays at the turn of the 20th century. during the suffragette movement, he got women to smoke cigarettes at these protests, and he called them torches of freedom. And like that's just always stuck with me. And so I've always wondered if the entire woke movement was just nothing but a marketing campaign, which kind of makes sense during the month of June, and everyone, all the corporate logos go rainbow. You know, it kind of just seems like everyone's being used to profit and then pit each other against each other because it makes money. So that's what freaks me out about it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one venue they use, but they don't always necessarily use the woke venue. So, like, I mean, 20 years ago, it was like this ultra Christian conservative movement that they hijacked to, further war and destruction and corporatism and all this, like centralization of power. And they used fear of Satanism and Islamic extremism and all this crap, fear of Harry Potter or whatever. Like, it was retarded, the amount of propaganda going on that, like we need. So that was what they used 20 years ago. And right now it's this more woke bullshit crap. So I just think that the government doesn't give a shit about your religion or about your cultural preferences or your sexual preference or whatever. They'll hijack all of it to further their goals. That's all they care about. So, like look at Raytheon. They did well under the Bush years, not quite as well as Halliburton, but they were making bank under Bush and Cheney. And then they fully jumped on board with all this woke shit about like, oh, we have non-binary employees and, whatever. And then the banks, same thing. Like the banks went along with it. Like they'll all do whatever they have to do to make money and gain power. And they have no allegiance to anything but themselves. So they'll use your culture, your religion, your family, and then they'll just shit on it afterward. So that's all they do.
I agree. I think to the point. So I actually had this thought the other day. I was actually on lunch after or during work, and I was just thinking about the whole social impact of just masking that we had to go through. And to me, just because of like how nefarious some of these key players are, it just seemed kind of like they did it to flex on everyone, just kind of show exactly what they're capable of. Now, obviously, not everyone. I don't believe people can be absolute, but it did seem like seemed like they knew it was coming, and they knew that all of this was bullshit, and they did it anyways. Could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. So, it just kind of seemed like because when it came to the masks, it didn't matter. Little kids, the elderly, white, black, brown, man, woman, somewhere in between, or not even a part of that. Like it didn't matter. It was everybody. And I think that's really important for people to understand is that no matter how nice you are, the state will still fucking kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a group of people who meet in a room and say, we're going to do this. It's just you have this system where you have media that makes money off of ratings, and then you have government that can seize more power and gain more control. And then you have businesses that can make a ton of money off of crises, right? So Halliburton, Raytheon, the banks, whatever, like when there's a crisis. So when there's a war, when you need a bailout, and then Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson being the latest ones, when you need a ton of vaccines, or like all these corporations that were allowed to stay open and take advantage of all the small businesses that went under. Like, they all have an incentive to go along with what's happening. So you don't need like a coordinated effort. It's just the natural way that these entities are thinking. So that's just going to always happen whenever there's something like this. So, you know, some people think it's like the Illuminati sitting in a room trying to figure out how to do it. I don't think they really need that. I think it's just intuition, and that's, you know, like, it sucks but that's how it works.
Well, I mean, it's because all of these terrible people who are doing all these shady things are all conglomerated in the same building. That's why it seems like everyone's colluding with each other. And of course, collusion happens. Like, it does happen, but it's, I mean, I don't know. I do have some questions about the World Economic Forum. I'd really like to know what they're up to. But yeah, in general, it's not just like this smoky filled back room and, you know, Satanistic rituals and stuff. Well, okay, I can't say can't. Once again, can't be absolute. I'm sure there's some of that in Washington too, but that's not the norm.
Right. I mean, there are things like Epstein's, you know, rape rings and shit like that. So that type of stuff does exist. Like, it's not like it's not a thing. I just don't think everybody has to be bribed or coerced into doing it. I think that it's just the natural way everybody reacts. But yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because it does. And it's kind of terrifying. So
that's one thing I actually did want to ask you about is, why don't you think there's been more blowback for Epstein or Maxwell or anything?
I don't think anyone really knows what's going on. I mean, if you asked, so it seems like the mainstream group that's most in tune with the Epstein stuff is probably the MAGA people, right? Like, they're the ones, I mean, like, mainstream, not niche groups. Like, there are people like me and Ryan and Addy Ads and Adam Fitzgerald and those type of people who actually know about it. But then there's, like, I'd say the Trump people are the ones who would probably be like, Epstein, 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 Epstein. If you asked them, who is Epstein? Like, who was Epstein? What did he do? They wouldn't know about any of the deep state connections. Because when they say deep state, I don't even know what they're picturing. They're picturing, you know, like, blood drinking, Satan worshiping lizard people or whatever. It's like, the deep state is the mega group, you know, Les Wexner, you know, you know, and then it's also, the other part of the deep state is the intelligence agencies that you guys sometimes hate, but then you instantly love them once they're telling you about the Uyghurs in China, or once they're telling you that we need to airstrike Soleimani to stop a war from happening. Then the intelligence agencies are your best friends. So, like, the people who have, like, a tiny sliver of information on this, they're just fucking retarded. They don't have any depth of understanding of what's going on. So they think Maxwell and Epstein were just running a rape ring for their own jollies or something. It's like, no, that wasn't the point of it. The point of it was blackmailing politicians into, you know, into supporting Zionist agendas. And you try telling that to Trump supporters, that Israel is behind this, you know, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to be like, no, that's, you know, that's God's chosen country and we stand with them, whatever. So I think that's why it doesn't have much blowback, because people don't know anything about it. And then the ones who do, they don't even know enough to be dangerous. They just have, like, such a tiny sliver of, you know, just surface level awareness. And if they started digging into it, they'd hate it, because they'd find out, oh, wow, all the people I like are wrapped up in this, you know, like Donald Trump. And so I don't know, like, that's why I think there hasn't been huge kickback because nobody, even libertarians, like most libertarians don't even know about that and about how deep it goes. And, you know, they don't realize Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, you know, that he's involved, or that Bill Richardson, former governor of New Mexico, Glenn Dubin, you know, I mean, the names just go on and on and on. I don't have my Epstein map behind me, but, you know, it's just, it's deep and wide and disgusting. And it was run by Israeli spies. And that's the uncomfortable truth that no one wants to admit, you know?
Don't criticize them, because then, you know, they'll drop the hammer on you, apparently. So that's, yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I got one of these Epstein maps.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to get one of those. Definitely need to pick one up, anyone watching this. Thanks, Ryan, for that. Yeah, it really is just a rabbit hole that just keeps going. And they're all interconnected in such a way that how could you ever untangle that unless you spend your entire time researching this? You would need like a biblical scholar level of energy and time to be able to just dig into all the connections, what they've done for each other, and who's paying who's sleeping with who betrayed who. I agree, but the one thing that just shocks me is that nobody even, like, Epstein was a big meme for a minute, and then what? Gone. Like, it's just insane to me. And these are some of the biggest stories in the world.
I think he was just a meme because of his attachments to Clinton. Like, that's why the Trump supporters are all about it, because they know they've seen the picture of Clinton in the dress or whatever, and, you know, that he went to Epstein's Island however many times, and that's the connection. It's just like the only reason there was any mainstream coverage was because there was originally a mainstream Trump connection that fell through. You know, so then they stopped talking about it after that. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, Ryan has devoted his life to, like, he's done what you're talking about. Like, I mean, realistically, my knowledge on this is surface level. Like, I just know a lot of the names and some of the main connections, and I've had Maria Farmer on my show, and I've talked to Ryan a lot, but, like, compared to me, most people don't know shit. Like, I would seem like an expert on it compared to, like, most people who you know, just have a surface level understanding of it. So yeah, I mean, there's just, like, no one. Yeah, you know, it's so, like, while Ghislaine Maxwell's been on trial, and when Epstein, well, let's see, not when Epstein got arrested. No, yeah, around that time, Ryan Dawson got banned off of, like, everything around the time Epstein got arrested, I guess, maybe a little bit later. But while this whole when I'm getting my years mixed up, it's all blending together. Ryan still had platforms when Epstein got arrested, and when he died, it was when Ghislaine Maxwell got arrested. Around that time, he lost his Twitter, and then he lost his YouTube soon after that, and then he hasn't had anything, you know, throughout this whole coverage of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and everything. And so there's been no one who's, like, got a huge platform who can explain what's going on. Like, imagine if Ryan Dawson had 200,000 followers on Twitter and he had however many thousand subscribers he'd have by now on YouTube, and he could be explaining this shit, you know, day by day as it's going, but no one knows where to find him. And I don't have that big an audience, you know, so people can come watch him on my show, but it's just not the same. So, like, there's there's no widespread coverage of this, so no one knows anything about it.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much the idea, right? Is to, like, even if some people know about it, as long as you keep it out of the minds and mouths of the people who could actually do something. I mean, of course, you don't even see milk toast people like Tim Pool even push some of these ideas either.
No.
And I guess I kind of get it. They've built up their entire business around that, and once you start pushing some of these ideas, then those are also the people who can pull the plug on your entire compound and everything you've built. So I guess I kind of get it, but I don't know.
Well, think about this, like Joe Rogan. Think of like what in reality, what like a squishy liberal he really is. Like he's just kind of a centrist liberal in real life. That's what he is. He's not a conservative. Yeah. He's certainly not a libertarian. He's just kind of like a squishy liberal who likes to talk to people. But look at what they did to him anyways. Like look at the amount of pressure they put on him just because he was talking to people. So yeah, like I mean they'll destroy someone like Ryan. But if you're big like Joe Rogan or Tim Pool, like yeah, they'll put the screws to you, and even if you just deviate a tiny bit or ask questions you're not supposed to. So if you have answers to these questions like Ryan does, like ooh man, you're in trouble.
Yeah, seriously. So I'm gonna wrap up here, but one thing I did want to ask you, and got that video to work, so we'll play that on our way out. But one thing I wanted your perspective on was, why is liberty important?
Well, I think truth is important. Like I want to know what's true, and the only way to find out what's true is by being uncomfortable. Because if you're not willing to push into areas of discomfort, then you're never going to find out if anything you've previously thought was wrong. And I find that comfort is just the biggest threat to liberty. Like people who don't break out of their bubbles, they don't do it because they're scared that they're going to have to think, right? They're scared that they're going to have to work to find something true. It's easy to just have everything compartmentalized in a neat little box and never have to think about it. But any breakthrough that humanity has had throughout history has been through discomfort, right? Like it was tough to build the railroads from sea to sea. It was tough to get to the top of Mount Everest. It was tough to get to the North and South Pole. It was tough to learn how to fly. Like all these things took a lot of struggle and effort, but they were worth doing because it I guess it comes down to like what you care about. Like some people, this is why it's tough now, because some people just really don't care. Like some people would rather not have liberty and not know what is true. And the question is like, do you just let people do that? Like, I guess you do. Like if people don't want to be set free, then you can't set them free. You know, it's something they have to want. If they want to just believe whatever lie they've been told their whole lives, what do you do? Like you can't change their minds about that. Like if that's what they want, okay. And that's what I mean by like that's why I've decided to get involved with the Free State Project, just because I think libertarians do want to know what's true, and they do want to know what's real, and they want to push, you know, and a lot of NPCs, they just don't. It's easier to put a Ukraine flag in your bio and wear a mask every day and, you know, just go on with your life. And you can only, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, you know, like if people don't want to be set free, then they won't be set free. So I don't know. It's important to me, and I think it's important to some people, So, those are the people I care about at this point. Like, if you don't want to be set free, if you want to enslave yourself, I've run out of patience or empathy for you. Like, I just don't care anymore. I care about people like me who don't want this, who didn't ask for it, who are being persecuted, especially people who are being murdered overseas who didn't ask for this, but also for people who are stuck in a cage here because they smoked a plant. They didn't ask for that. I didn't ask to get taxed to support any of this shit. So everyone who doesn't want to be part of this, you're the ones I sympathize with. Everyone who wants freedom, everyone who wants liberty, you're the ones I care about. If you're in the group that doesn't want it, fine. I can't make you want it, but leave me out of your project because I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good advertisement for New Hampshire right there, I would say. So some great things going on over there. I had talked to Justin O'Donnell about the idea of how do we replicate what's going on there somewhere else. And I mean, after having that conversation and thinking about it, I think it is happening. There's like the Earthship community. There's some more extreme versions of this happening throughout the country. I can't remember the name of the town. It's in California. It's an unincorporated town. Everyone just lives in trailers. There's no law out there. So it's just an anarchist society. So, I mean, not everything's going to be like the Free State Project, and I don't think it has to be, honestly. But I would like people to definitely look and see what's going on in New Hampshire, because I think it's really important and I think it's groundbreaking in many ways. And honestly, we can replicate that other places. So if you don't want to move over there, then start working on how to get it done in your area. So let's see, before we take off, let's see, I was going to play this collection of CNN because fuck these guys, and I thought this was hilarious.
Research by Gallup says American trust in the mass media is at its lowest point since 2016 and near a record low overall.
Jeff Zucker has announced his immediate resignation as the president of CNN. This comes amid an investigation into what Jeff Zucker calls a consensual relationship.
What happened and where CNN goes from here?
You were caught masturbating on camera. You since then have been on leave from CNN. Do I have all that right?
You got it all right. Sad to say.
The biggest media story this weekend, it's the firing of Chris Cuomo from this network, CNN. Late Wednesday, a lawyer contacted CNN with a sexual misconduct complaint about Cuomo.
Joining me now, the man who accused Don Lemon of sexual assault. His accuser claims Lemon started rubbing himself.
But the even bigger point, I think, is about what the press is. Is it produced by reporters or by repeaters? Repeaters are the talk radio shouters. They're on TV and radio telling the same story every day. President Trump.
President Trump. President Trump. Trump.
Trump.
Trump. Trump.
Trump.
Trump.
Trump. Trump. Trump. Trump. Trump.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Telling the same story every day.
Repeaters are Twitter trolls who anonymously amplify propaganda and try to wear the rest of us down with their repetition.
January 6th.
January 6th.
January 6th. January 6th.
January 6th. January 6th.
January 6th.
January 6th.
Repetition.
The January 6th insurrection.
The insurrection. The insurrection.
The insurrection.
The insurrection. The insurrection.
Insurrection. Insurrection.
Repetition. Repetition.
Repetition.
So much of what they are repeating is from reporters, from the people paid to figure out what is true.
A widely held conspiracy theory that the coronavirus was created in a Chinese laboratory.
Dr. Fauci, thank you for keeping it straight. Thank you for fighting the good fight.
We know the science. We know that masks work.
What we have now is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is really now a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the
Something interesting. So, really glad to see that those guys aren't going to be in airports anymore. It's not a big win, but it's something, and makes me happy. So definitely thank you for coming on. It's a monumental day in the the sphere of actually maybe breaking some of that propaganda. Maybe not much, but some. And so it was definitely an honor to have you on. Give a shout out, let everyone know what you've got going on, where they can find you and whatnot.
Sure. Well, I have Ron Paul coming on my show next week. My show is The Naturalist Capitalist. You can follow me on YouTube, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I guess Jacob's got my link tree in the description, so just go check that out. Follow me all those places. And yeah, we'll be at the Utah Libertarian Party Convention next weekend, and I hope to be going to Reno to help with the Reno reset, because I've had enough of these idiots that just want a social club and don't want to change anything. So if you're in Utah, make sure you're going to be there next weekend, and we'll see what we can do.
Right on, man. Thanks again. And I will see you next weekend.
All right, man. Sounds good.
Drive safe out there.